Hello, folks, and welcome to week number 3 of Counseling a College-Bound Student. For many of you, I'm sure you're on July 4th holiday, and that's great. But here are some updates and notes for this week. You should have in the assignment Dropbox assignment number 5, the Data and Achievement Gap Project, as well as assignment number 6, the Internet Research. I know some of you already started that, and that's great. You should have the appropriate materials in the assignment Dropbox for those. You also have discussion questions for week 3. Number 1 is about the achievement gap and how you would handle a piece of data that is of concern to you. Pay particular attention to how you can make it useful in your school, what you can do to change that. And I know some of you don't work in schools, but you need to put your detective hat on and try to find out resolutions or opportunities to close that gap or the gaps that exist. If you're having a problem finding good data, let me know, but by simply going to the DESE website and looking under school profiles, you should be able to get some good ideas. And there's plenty of schools out there that have significant achievement gaps. Question number 2 is about classroom lesson delivery, and you certainly will have some information in the lecture notes. After the fact, since we had a lesson plan due last week, but wanted to follow up with just some more details about that in terms of preparing you, if you aren't already in the classroom, how you would do a better job with classroom delivery. And there's also a couple of attachments that I put in course documents related to the lesson planning. The topics for this week are using data, types of colleges, resources to search for college, college tours and fairs, classroom guidance delivery, and technology. So it's quite a bit. I think you'll find that the lecture notes will be pretty specific and give you some more detailed information as best we can in an online class. Let me just give you some highlights of some of the topics for you at this point. I can't say enough about data. Certainly was not why I went into the counseling field, but understand it now more than ever and use it on a regular basis. If you're not collecting, analyzing, and sharing your data, you are not having a comprehensive program, and I would suggest that you really pay attention to, I believe it's chapter 9 in the textbook. There's also Dr. Hatch, who wrote that chapter, also wrote a whole textbook on using data in school counseling. I would recommend highly that you get that book and read it if you're not familiar with it or you're scared with it. I understand data is not necessarily what we went into this field for, or we're not as comfortable with it, but you have to. It's really not a choice anymore. But you will find some information in the lecture notes about that, and I think that again the chapter will help bring some of it together. When in doubt, ask or talk to other colleagues, because we're all in this together, and that's what I do with my staff. Is we work together to solve issues or challenges and look at data together. So it's not I'm in it alone and I don't know how to do it, and so therefore I avoid it. In terms of types of colleges, this is just really looking at, besides your typical college or university name, there are certainly some schools that are specialty schools, whether it be a business school or a military school or a single gender school. So just be aware of that. It's more of an FYI. If you're not aware of some of those specific schools, that just have that knowledge or that content, as some students may be seeking those. In terms of resources, in the lecture notes I've listed lots of different opportunities. I know that when you did your assignment for the setting up the office, many of you did not use print materials. Certainly understand that those are becoming passé, but there are certainly some that are still relevant. May not be your area of comfort, but it might be something you want to have as a balance and not be totally relying on the internet. Even if there aren't search books, which I understand get outdated very quickly, my recommendation is at least some of the books about the whole process. Some kids do read, and they may find it helpful to have a list of books or resources that might be available to them. In terms of college tours and fairs, this is just to let you know that that is an option for folks. There are companies that certainly could do that. A lot of schools do homegrown tours and fairs. You might have one in your own school. The idea is really we want to expose students to as many things as possible, and especially if you have a low going to college rate or where you have a population that won't do visits, you may find that visiting schools will be helpful, and virtually every school, college that I've worked with is willing to do some sort of tour. You know, they may not pay for your bus and they may not give you a meal, but they at least will have information about their school, and it's about getting kids exposed to college, and particularly early. In some ways, this is too late in high school, but that's a whole nother lecture. Classroom guidance delivery, again, this may be somewhat anticlimactic since we did our lesson plan last week, but for the those of you that have been through teacher prep programs, this is probably not a big deal for you. For those of you that are in counseling programs and never went through teacher prep, may have not really gotten any instruction on how to write lesson plans. So again, I posted a couple things in the lecture notes, in the course documents that you may find helpful. But even looking at things like Bloom's taxonomy or Webb's depth of knowledge, you know, how are we crafting a lesson? Just like an English teacher or a math teacher would craft a lesson, you know, we want to do the same, and we want to be providing the same types of information and delivery that our colleagues are doing. So if this is an area of weakness or you feel like you need to improve on, you know, I would definitely work with maybe a curriculum director or administrator who this is maybe their strength, but also working with some of your best teachers in terms of, let me see your lesson plan and how do you craft your activities. I find that some counselors do not prefer the classroom. I understand that. They didn't go into counseling to be a teacher, but we are teachers in many ways, and we do have that opportunity to impact lots of students in those smaller groups or classroom size groups. So it's really important that we do make an effort to do the best we can so that it is better than just you going in and winging it. And you need to have a lesson, and for many of you, I gave you feedback about your lessons. They need to be specific. They need to have information about how long each section is going to be, because if you have a 45-minute class period, you have to think ahead, how am I going to use that time? Or if I only have 20 minutes, how am I going to use that time? So they may not work, the times may be off, but you at least need to have that planned ahead of time before you start your lesson. And the last piece for this week is just technology. And again, this is, I wrote in the lecture notes way too much to actually really cover in a short online video, but you can certainly, there's resources there. Obviously, you just Google whatever and you'll get lots of more resources, but be thinking about how do you use technology in terms of some of the ways we apply to school, in terms of what you have for software, whether you use Naviance or your plan for the future or career cruising. Those are resources that are available to you. Thinking about how do we use apps for our phone, that's a new area that I'm still learning, and I think that's an area that will continue to evolve. And using resources like Remind 101, or now called Remind, where you can send a text message. You know, we know our kids are not reading paper, probably not opening email, but we've got to be where they're at, and I think that that just is always, you know, one step ahead of the game. So just being aware of that, having conversation. You know, this is an area where if you can go to a conference that has some opportunities about technology, that would be to your advantage, because you'll hear about some of the latest and greatest things that are happening. And as you know, there are things happening all the time. So that's it for this week. Hope you're enjoying your July 4th holiday, and let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.